Do you want to play a game?
They're here.
Welcome to another episode of Blood, Gore, and Ghouls. I'm your host, Ian Van Gogh. As we do each week, we'll be talking about horror movies, news, topics, fun facts, questions, anything else horror-related that you like to hear about. And of course, you can find me playing video games, playing the acoustic guitar, and recording this podcast live at twitch.tv/Ian Van Gogh. Find me on YouTube at Ian Van Gogh, and reviewing a different horror movie every single day on TikTok at Ian.VanGogh. Get your very own Ghoul Squad merch at GhoulSquadShop.com. Be sure to join our Ghoul Squad Discord so you can stay up to date on all the stream, music, podcast news, and updates, share movie recommendations, movie trailers, song requests, and subjects for the podcast, as well as much, much more. Of course, you can find the audio portion of this podcast on all platforms where you listen to your favorite podcasts. So we'll get into some news from the past week. So, as you all know, I use TikTok mainly for daily horror movie reviews. Now, once in a while, I'll throw in something different like a horror movie bracket or horror topic, sometimes something music related, and every once in a while, I'll make a video showcasing my artwork or more creative side. So last Thursday, I had the idea of purchasing a bust of Edgar Allan Poe from Michael's art store, and essentially turning it into a bust of Papa Emeritus IV, the current frontman of the band Ghost. So I did just that. I bought the bust. I bought a Dremel tool so I could easily remove his mustache. I stripped the paint from the bust and repainted it. Now, I recorded the process. I made a TikTok video, and I was not expecting the response that I would get from that. So in the past 4 days, it's received 193,000 views, 27,000 likes, and many, many new followers for my account. Now, it's not a brag or a flex by any means. I'm just kind of blown away by the reception of it. You know, I made a video today to introduce myself and thank everyone for the amazing reception on TikTok. But yeah, it was just mind-blowing. It was a little overwhelming. Like, I'm not used to that much traffic on my page. Before, I think my highest viewed video was like 74,000, and it wasn't within a few days at all. It was just kind of random here and there that they just added up over time. So yeah, it was a crazy few days there. But yeah, I'm just kind of blown away by it. It was really, really cool. And then I was instantly worried that after all these new followers that they were going to expect that type of content when really it was just kind of a one-off. Like, I don't usually do the creative stuff like that on TikTok. So it was a little worrying there for a bit, but overall it's been an awesome experience, really fun, and yeah, I'm excited to see where it kind of goes from there. So getting into horror news, I went to see The Nun 2 this past Sunday. Now, I had very little expectations, but was hoping for a kind of Annabelle Ouija situation where the first one is less than stellar, but the sequel is pretty fucking good. Now, unfortunately, at least in my opinion, that's not the case with this. Now, I do think it's a bit better than the first, but not by much. It has some cool scenes, a few gnarly visuals, but the rest just felt like filler. Now, the story had potential, but it never went anywhere, really. Like I said in my review, I don't understand how twice now they've given us a shitty story about a demon nun. Like, the amount of source material that's available from real life horrific events involving religion, churches, and more specifically the Catholic Church. How can you not come up with a solid story? Like, it's pretty simple. Like, it's, you know, a nun possessed by a demon. Like, just come up with a cool fucking story. But yeah, I'm not sure that there's many people out there who enjoyed it. You know, if you did, I'm genuinely happy for you. I wish I was one of them. But yeah, Nun 2, pretty disappointing. Now, in the news of upcoming horror movies, we are getting a few interesting ones. Now, this calls back to our very first episode of the podcast, where I told you all what non-horror properties I like to see turned into horror movies. So first, we are getting a movie titled Mary Had a Little Lamb, as well as one titled Three Blind Mice. Now, I'm intrigued by both. I posted both the trailers in our Discord, so go check them out if you haven't seen them yet. Now, they look pretty low budget. Not a shock there. But it's not a bad thing. I love me some low budget horror, and hopefully it's at least a fun time. There's also been some images released for the upcoming sequel, Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Now, I really enjoyed the first one. I know I'm in the minority on that. I'm not sure why. Like, that movie got so much hate, so many bad reviews. Now, it's not a good movie, but I don't know. I feel like people set their expectations too high for a Winnie the Pooh horror, like a horror version of Winnie the Pooh. Like, what did you expect? Like, it was exactly what I expected. It's ridiculous nonsense with a lot of gore. So I was very happy with it. It's not a great movie, but it's a fun, ridiculous time. So as far as this sequel goes, I'm very excited to see what's in store. I saw an image of Tigger, so pretty stoked that he's in it. There's a little bit of a redesign for Pooh and Piglet. So I don't know, we'll just wait and see, but I'm a little stoked for it. There was also an announcement for another sequel that I'm pretty excited about, and that's Brightburn 2. Now, if you've never seen Brightburn, I definitely recommend it. It's a retelling of the classic story of Superman, but if he had been born evil rather than good. And I thought it was a very fun watch, and a refreshing change from the kind of stereotypical superhero movies that we've been getting, for the past 20 years or so. And I remember reviewing it and saying that I hoped that we would get a sequel someday. So I'm pretty stoked that it seems that I'm maybe getting my wish on that. So any further announcements I will bring to your attention in future episodes. But as of right now, it seems that it was announced for a Brightburn 2. Finally, there was a trailer released for a new Blumhouse movie called Totally Killer. It's a horror comedy time travel slasher starring Kiernan Shipka. It looks like it could be a lot of fun. Now, I'm excited to check that out when it's released on Amazon Prime on October 6th. The trailer is also posted in Discord if you haven't seen it yet. So go check it out. It looks like a lot of fun. And October 6th is looking to be a very busy day for horror movies. So far, we have Exorcist Believer in theaters, Pet Sematary Bloodlines on Paramount Plus, Totally Killer on Amazon Prime, and for all my fellow Blink-182 fanatics, and more specifically, Tom DeLonge fanatics, his movie Monsters of California will be released that day as well. So looks like it's going to be a busy weekend, and looks like my reviews are pretty much scheduled and booked for that weekend. So can't wait for that. It should be a very fun time. So as far as our main topic today, we're going to discuss remakes. So which ones are good, which ones are bad, which are the best, which are the worst. But first of all, what's considered a remake? So there's a lot of different opinions, definitions, misconceptions when it comes to that question. Now, when it comes to my definition of a remake, I say it's a retelling or updated version of a previous movie that had an original script. So movies based on books or short stories, regardless of how many versions there are throughout the years, such as It, Pet Sematary, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Fly, or even The Thing, I don't consider those remakes. They're just re-adaptations, or they're separate adaptations of the same source material. So, if I've done my homework correctly, these next 19 or so movies that we're talking about all started as original screenplays, were then remade at a later date. Of course, I am only human, so if there is one based on a book or short story that I'm unaware of, then I do apologize ahead of time, and I'm simply a fuck up. But let's get into it. So for this list, we'll go from oldest to newest as far as release date for the remake. So number 1 is Night of the Living Dead. Released in 1968, it's directed by George A. Romero, classic zombie movie about a group of people stuck in a farmhouse trying to survive the night against the undead. Now, the remake was released in 1990, directed by Tom Savini. It tells the same basic story, but with a few differences. The character Barbara is a stronger character and less damsel in distress. Tony Todd plays the role of Ben, originally played by Dwayne Jones. The ending is changed up a bit, and we get some updated blood, gore, and makeup effects, of course. Now, they're both very good movies. They're very hard to choose which is better. I personally prefer the original, but either one is a great viewing choice. Now, there have been other remakes through the years, but none compare to the original or the 1990 Savini version. So really, it's just kind of personal preference. You want the OG that started it all, black and white, or the Savini 1990, better effects, more blood and gore, and in color. So they're both super solid choices. I personally just go OG though. So number 2 is Psycho. Now this one is a bit different in the fact that Psycho is based on a novel. However, it is on this list because the remake is just that. It's not a different telling of or a different version of the source material. It's literally a shot for shot version of the original Alfred Hitchcock movie from 1960. So the original starred Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. It's of course a well-known classic. Now, the 1998 remake, directed by Gus Van Sant, has Vince Vaughn in the role of Bates, also stars Anne Heche, Julianne Moore, Viggo Mortensen, and William H. Macy. So it is a great cast. The movie itself just doesn't compare to the original, though. As I said, it is a shot-for-shot remake, but with added nudity and a few small things that were left to the imagination in the original. I'm just very confused as to why Gus Van Sant thought this would be a great idea. Because in my opinion, it's a terrible idea. It didn't translate well. I don't know. The original Psycho is just, it's a classic. It doesn't need an updated version. So obviously, in my opinion, the original is just better in every single way. The remake didn't need to exist at all. Number 3 is House on Haunted Hill. That was released in 1959, directed by William Castle, stars Vincent Price. Now, this movie tells the story of a millionaire who offers $10,000 to 5 people who can stay the night in a haunted mansion. Now, the remake was released in 1999, stars Jeffrey Rush in the Price role. It tells the same story, but with a lot more blood, gore, and eerie visuals. I do enjoy the original, mainly for Vincent Price. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Vincent Price. It's where I got the Van Gogh name from. But the remake took the same story and improved it overall. So it has a great cast as well, a great soundtrack, and it's just a really fun time overall. So in this case, I definitely prefer the remake over the original. But again, they're so vastly different. Like they share the same very basic plot, but the remake just added so much to it that it really feels like a completely different movie. So definitely go with the remake over the original. Sticking with that same kind of theme, number 4 is 13 Ghosts. This was another movie directed by William Castle, and it was released just 1 year after House on Haunted Hill. This movie is about a family who inherits a mansion filled with ghosts. The movie is entertaining and it's fun for the time, but the 2001 remake expands and improves the entire story. Has a great cast, including Matthew Lillard, Tony Shalhoub, and Shannon Elizabeth. The movie takes the silly, fun concept of the original and turns it into a bloody, shocking, really fun time. Again, I appreciate the original for what it is, but the remake is just simply better. They just added so much more depth and more to the story. So I really, really enjoy the remake over the original. Number 5, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This one is no stranger to the podcast. I feel like we've talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre on just about every episode so far. So we have Tobe Hooper's 1973 original versus Marcus Nispel's 2003 remake. That was another one that took the same story but expanded on it. It gave us different characters, a new surname for the family. So it's Hewitt in this one. It was Sawyer in the original. It showed us all the blood and gore that the original only implied. and it beefed up Leatherface to the point that he's absolutely terrifying. The 2003 remake does have its flaws, but in my opinion, it stayed true enough to the original and then improved upon it. So, as I've said here before, I'm not the biggest fan of the original, but I have mad respect for it, and I love Gunnar Hansen's Leatherface. But the remake, like I said, it's not perfect, but it took that idea and, like I said, it, in my opinion, it improved it greatly, added so much more to it. So it's a tough one, but I would have to say remake on that one. Number 6, Dawn of the Dead. So George A. Romero's 1978 classic versus Zack Snyder's 2004 remake. Now, I do really like the remake, but I'm always partial to the original. So the story, characters, zombie effects, and the late 70s feel still just hit different. The remake has that amazing opening scene. There's a few good characters. It does expand the story a bit. You know, it's great, but I don't like it enough to say that it's better than the original. Like the original Dawn of the Dead, I just have a forever spot in my heart for that movie. And so the remake was good, but it did not pass it overall, in my opinion. And it gave us, you know, fast running zombies as opposed to the classic original Romero zombies. So I go original for Dawn of the Dead. Now, number 7 is The Fog. This is one of the few on the list that I don't really enjoy either movie. John Carpenter's 1980 original, it's entertaining enough, but it doesn't stand out among the countless fantastic horror movies of the 80s. And the 2005 remake starring Tom Welling and Maggie Grace is a pretty rough time. So the original was a pretty straightforward story, and the remake could have taken that and expanded on it and actually make it creepy. But alas, that did not happen. So we get a weak story, weak acting, terrible effects, and just an overall bad time. Like I said, not a fan of either one, but in this case, the original is definitely going to take it. The remake, just not for me. Number 8, The Hills Have Eyes. Now, in my opinion, Wes Craven's 1977 original is damn near unwatchable. I tried watching it a few months ago for a review. I couldn't even make it halfway through it. It's just bad. The remake, however, is one of the gnarliest, disgusting, brutal movies that I've seen. Now, it has been quite a few years since I've watched the remake, but I can confidently say that it is hands down miles ahead of the original. It improves it in every way. And that's all I got to say about that. There's not really much else to say. So number 9, The Omen. So in the case of The Omen, the original is so good, it's so iconic, that the remake didn't have much chance of outdoing it. To me, the remake stays too close to the original movie, and it doesn't do much to build upon it. It's not a terrible movie, but if you're going to watch The Omen, then you've got to go with the original. It still holds up. It's still creepy as hell. And although the remake's not a shot-for-shot remake, it does feel like it. Like, I can't think of any scene that was made up for the remake that wasn't in the original. So if you're going to watch it, you might as well go OG. Number 10 is Black Christmas. Now, in my opinion, Bob Clark's 1974 original is very hard to top. It keeps it simple. It's very effective for what it is. The 2006 remake isn't bad, but it tried too hard to expand the story, and it just didn't work well for me. The Billy Killer character is no longer a mystery. He's not really behind the curtain at all. It gives an entire backstory, adds an additional killer, and includes some really weird incest subplot that just wasn't needed. The remake, for the most part, is a dumb, fun slasher that adds more blood, gore, and character development, but it's another one that just doesn't compare to the original for me. The original is so good because it has that mystery, and it's more, I'd say, realistic. Whereas the remake just showed us everything behind the curtain. It made up, like I said, that really ridiculous backstory for the characters. And it was just gross. It was just gross overall. So definitely OG. I haven't watched the 2019 version yet, So we will get to that in another episode. But yeah, original all day. Number 11, Halloween. Now, John Carpenter's 1978 original is a very hard one to top. It's one of my all-time favorite horror movies, and it's damn near perfect in my opinion. Now, Rob Zombie's 2007 remake is amazing in its own right. So it's probably one of the most divisive movies in the horror community. Rob stayed true to the original, but he added his own flair to it. Michael has a backstory, some insight into how he became Michael Myers that we all know, and Tyler Mane as Michael Myers was a fantastic choice. As is the case with all of Rob Zombie's movies, the characters are pretty white trash, but I think it works well in this case. It has a great cast, a good story, and is no surprise, brutal as hell. The original is hard to top, but the remake puts up a pretty good fight, and I feel like the remake is similar, but kind of its own entity. So it's really, you can watch either one and get a different sort of experience. So I would say I prefer the original, but I also am a pretty big fan of Rob Zombie's version as well. Number 12 is Friday the 13th. So obviously the original was a classic. It still shocks people when they learn that Jason Voorhees is not the killer in this one. I have mad love for it, and it's another one that is hard to top. However, the 2009 remake, in my opinion, did a really good job of taking the story from the first three movies and making one pretty badass remake. It's another one that is pretty divisive in the community, but I thought it was pretty good overall. Now, granted, the opening events before the title card, which is about 30 minutes into the movie, is the highlight of the movie. I don't think the rest of the movie does quite as well, but it's still a decent watch. I'm still partial to the original first three Friday the 13th movies, at least, so I prefer those. But I thought the remake did it pretty cool by kind of combining all those into one, and it was a decent story. So I think they're both pretty good watches, but I would personally just go OG and watch the first three Friday the 13th movies. Now, number 13 is Last House on the Left. So the original was directed by Wes Craven, released in 1972. Now, neither of these movies are easy watches, and they deal with some pretty heavy content. But I do prefer the remake. Now, it's more brutal, bloody, and gory, and I like the cast, which includes Tony Goldwyn, Monica Potter, Aaron Paul, and Sarah Paxton. So they're both pretty similar. Of course, the remake just kind of updates everything, and I feel like it's not quite as grim as the original. So yeah, it's a better viewing experience for me, at least, than the original is. So number 14, The Stepfather. 1987's original sees John Locke himself, Terry O'Quinn, in the title role. It's such a messed up movie, and his performance is pretty stellar. Now, the remake doesn't quite hit the same. It's another one that seems to try to just cash in on the popularity of remakes of 80s horror movies, that was happening at the time. Honestly, I don't really remember much from the remake outside of the cast, so it may be worth revisiting, but I'm still going to say that the original is better, or the better of the two. Number 15 is A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, another movie that is no stranger to our podcast. There are very few positives, in my opinion, about the 2010 remake of Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, but there are a few things that I did enjoy. It does have a great cast. We have Rooney Mara, Kyle Gallner, Connie Britton, motherfucking Clancy Brown, and of course, Jackie Earle Haley. Now, the cast deserved a much better movie, and it's a shame that they were wasted on this one. As I said in our opening scenes episode, I do really enjoy the opening scene of this movie, but it does fall apart pretty quickly after that. I do like Freddy's glove mannerisms in this one. The kind of swishing of the blades together is a really cool addition that Jackie brought to the character. And I think he did a great job as well in the role. The shitty cat-like makeup effects are no fault at all of Jackie Earle Haley, so I think he did a really good job in the role. Unfortunately, the movie itself just fell flat. But But I do also love the line of "We still have six more minutes to play." That line still gives me chills when I think about it. So if you've seen the movie, I'm sure you know the scene. But I thought that one particular scene was really cool. But overall, it's no comparison on this one. The '84 Robert Englund led Nightmare is without a doubt the better of the two. So number 16 is Fright Night. So Tom Holland wrote and directed the 1985 original, which starred Chris Sarandon in the role of the vampire neighbor Jerry Dandridge. This one is a classic. I definitely enjoy it, but it's not without its issues. Now, I find that most of the characters are a bit annoying, but overall it's a pretty solid 80s vampire movie. Also, it stars Roddy McDowall as Peter Vincent, so that alone gets it extra points in my book. Now, the 2011 remake almost does it better. The cast is phenomenal. We have the late, great Anton Yelchin as Charlie Brewster, Toni Collette, Imogen Poots, Christopher Mintz-Plasse as Evil Ed, David Tennant, and, of course, Colin Farrell as Jerry. Now, I absolutely would say this one beats out the original if it wasn't for all the very shitty CGI effects in this movie. Now, everything is a step up from the original, but those effects are just so god-awful that it really knocks it down a few points for me. So, unfortunately, I have to go with the classic campy 80s original. The remake is still a great movie if you can get past those effects. Like I said, it was such a disappointment because that movie was going so good. And I was such a fan of it. And then we get 3/4 of the way through it into the more kind of action type stuff. And those effects just fucking killed it. I was so bummed. So overall, like I said, it's still a good movie, but those effects were it drove a stake through my heart. Let's put it that way. Number 17, Poltergeist. So Tobe Hooper's 1982 Poltergeist is one that I always remember being a really good movie, but then when I watch it, I realize it's not that great at all. Now I still have mad respect for it. It has heart, and there's plenty of people out there that love it. I'm just personally not one of them. However, the 2015 remake is just bad. The story, the acting, the effects, none of it compares to the original. I watched it once and really didn't like it. I watched it again for review and unfortunately still didn't like it. So no contest for me. The original is better of the two by far. If you're going to watch one of them, go with the original. Number 18, Cabin Fever. So Eli Roth's 2002 feature film debut is decent for what it is. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the movie. It definitely has some gnarly content, some good and gross effects, and some memorable moments. It put Eli on the horror map. It gave us a decent cast, and it's a fine watch overall. For some reason, it was decided that they were going to remake it in 2016 using the exact same script. Now, I'll be honest. I checked out the remake a while ago after it was released, and I didn't make it more than 10 minutes into the movie. I shut it off. It was so fucking bad. Now, I'm not one to turn off movies, especially horror movies. Like, I'll typically sit through the worst ones because even if it starts off bad, sometimes there's things that happen midway through or at the end that really kind of turned it around. With this one, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't sit through it. I gave it 10 minutes and that was it. So if there's something I'm missing, then please let me know. But there's no chance in hell that the remake is better than the original. So our last one for today for remakes is Child's Play. Now, this is a prime example of taking a very popular, well-known character and trying to make more money off of it. So Chucky's been going strong since Child's Play was released in 1988. Now, unlike a lot of these movies that we've talked about tonight, there wasn't much of a gap in years between the last released movie in the franchise and the remake. So Call to Chucky released in 2017. 2 years later, we got the Child's Play remake. Overall, it's a very different movie. We see Chucky being AI controlled in this one as opposed to the voodoo soul transfer from the original. In my opinion, everything about it was bad. So the look of Chucky seemed off. The cast didn't do it for me. Now, I love Aubrey Plaza as an actress, but I didn't believe her in the role as Andy's mom. I just didn't, I don't know, it just seemed out of place to me. Like, it wasn't a good fit for her in that role. Even with the iconic voice of Mark Hamill as Chucky, it just didn't work for me. It's definitely one of my least favorite remakes on this list. It was unnecessary, ridiculous, and didn't need to exist. Plus, 3 years later, we get a very similar movie without the Child's Play strings attached, and it was miles better than this. That, of course, was Megan. So if you want a killer doll movie, original Child's Play, or any of the sequels are where it's at. If you want a killer AI-possessed doll, choose Megan over this wannabe Chucky bullshit. But that's gonna do it for another episode of Blood, Gore, and Ghouls. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to hang with us. Be sure to follow on Twitch at Ian Van Ghoul, join the Ghoul Squad Discord, subscribe on YouTube, follow on TikTok at ian.vanghoul. All links can be found in the show notes. Until next week, though, I've been your host, Ian Van Ghoul. Have a ghoulish week and stay safe out there.